into your planning committee. And mine as well. Right, minutes of the last meeting. These are your wish members are signed as a great record. Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Apologies for absence, please.
Councillor Davis-Smith.
No others? Right. Members' interest, disposable interest. Councillor Swift.
Yes, it's a very small thing. We have an application by Mr. Myers, a Brixworth, and we share water stopcocks together. So I see on my property, so I see him every month, but we haven't discussed the matter. I know it will make you laugh.
It's a very severe interest, Councillor.
To take legal advice, really.
Party whipping arrangements. Chairman. Right, members of the public, that means we don't get together as political parties or groups of people to decide how we're going to vote beforehand. Right, there are no planning applications that have been withdrawn or delegated, but there is a bit of housekeeping. If the fire alarm bell rings, we used to tell you to go quite orderly the way you came in, but now we have some stairs. Our outside steps have been replaced, so the outside steps you can go out, but with one proviso. If there is a fire, and I heard right, no, there isn't. When you get to the bottom step, there is a couple of paving stones missing. So if you have to go out of that way, be careful. Please switch your phones to silent, because if you don't, you have to pay the chairman £5 or £10, depending on what it sounds like. If it's a bad noise or a good noise, alright? That's for his charity fund. Speakers will have 3 minutes, and after that you'll hear a tone and then be asked to wind up. That's the only opportunity you have to speak, and I'm sure you won't clap, hiss, boo, cheer or stand up and wave your arms, but please don't. And you will see officers talking during the debate at probably the same time as when you're talking, which looks awfully bad manners. It's not, they're trying to find out an answer for the points that you're actually making. Okay, saying that, we'll go on to the first application, which is in Overstill.
So, thank you, Chairman. This is a planning application to create a new access onto the Sidle Road and call the main road actually at that end. I don't call Sidle Road at that end. But anyway, the main road in Ediston, and it involves punching in as a whole through the original Ediston Park wall, which is the same wall that used to surround the whole of the Ediston Park wall estate. It isn't actually listed in its own right, but we've always been careful to try and restrict and limit the number of openings in our section of the wall, because it goes into the adjacent district in Wellingborough at the far end. But we've always been keen to minimise the number of openings to maintain the integrity of the wall. We've got some photos of the wall there that you've been looking at. So this is a proposal for a new access, so they no longer have to have a shared access with two adjacent properties. And obviously the highway requirements are that not only do they have the access at a certain width, but they also have part of the wall set back on display to give pedestrian visibility displays. And our view is that, again, cumulative impact of holes in the wall mean that the character of the wall is being undermined. You see the comments there of the conservation officer. Incremental destruction to the form and character of the wall. So on that basis, we're recommending refusal, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to the Speaker, Councillor Cribbin.
Thank you. As local member, and also I'll just draw all members' attention to Councillor Warren's comment on page 12 at the bottom. He does refer to me and him having discussed this matter. What I would say is that I haven't discussed it at any length with Councillor Warren, and I'm not of any particular mind this evening. I've got an open mind as to what we're going to discuss tonight. I have taken advice from the monitoring officer, and the monitoring officer is of the opinion, provided I am of an open mind, which I am, that I will be allowed to stay within this meeting and take part in the meeting. What I propose to say is that I will sit and listen to what everybody says and then take a view at the end of everyone's debate. I'm not intending to do the same thing at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Crimmins. I'm sure that clears it up for us. Right, we go to the one speaker, which is Mrs. Townsend, who's the applicant.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I'm concerned that the report provided to you for this meeting may contain errors and omissions. Our primary concern is that the current access is dangerous due to limited visibility of approaching vehicles, particularly cyclists. There are no visibility displays. Over the years, much of the verge has been consumed by the road, and we now have to pull out into oncoming traffic to get a clear view. New housing developments, which will exceed 3,500 on the edge of Overston, and an expanded junior school are significantly increasing traffic through the village. The entrance through the 1.8 metre high wall on completion of our works will be only 3.3 metres wide, in a wall that is approximately 1.5 miles long through Overston and Sywell. An insignificant amount. The wall currently has a variety of openings throughout the two villages, some 100 metres long. The wall is not listed or subject to any preservation or conservation orders and never has been. In fact, it can't easily be seen for more than a mile along Billing Lane, as it's almost totally covered with ivy and tree growth. Ours is the only house on the wall side of Sywell Road without its own crossover. In 2006, Highways suggested we could lower the wall by 1 metre to improve visibility, but this would compromise our security. No planning permission would be necessary for this. We intend to leave the existing height of the wall as it is. Our tree consultant's report describes how all works will be carried out to ensure protection of affected trees. 2 Class C lower amenity sycamores will need to be removed to facilitate the works. In addition, the sycamores are close to the front boundary wall, and their incremental growth will result in direct damage to the wall. We will be held personally liable for any injury or deaths caused. Northamptonshire Highways requirement is to prevent motor vehicles from 69 exiting from 2 openings. Those aren't our pictures. They agree bollards or a hedge between the 2 properties would suffice. The impact on the sweet chestnut tree would be negligible. We don't own or share ownership of the existing access. Everyone keeps saying we share it, we don't. Our new neighbours at 69A have made it clear to me that we only have a right to pass over the access, their access, and have refused to let us leave our waste bins out in the drive for collection. I have a recording of this conversation with me where that's stated. We only want our own safe access onto the road, which we will ensure is totally sympathetic to the existing character. I do please invite questions. I do stress we do not share ownership of this drive. I'm sorry, I'm upset. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Crimmins, you have the right, if you want to speak first, or do you want to defer it to that?
I'd rather let my fellow members debate, and I don't want to influence them in any way, or we seem to be I want to be an open mind.
I usually go to the local member first. Okay, Councillor Oversworth.
Yes, 2 things. The speaker says that the wall is not listed, but do we have, is that the same understanding for the officer, or what is the impact on the Overston Hall and its setting, if there is any?
£10. Yeah. That committee and members of the public is not £10 to chairman of charity. Marvellous, isn't it? We collect a lot of money this way.
20.
Did the planning officer want to answer that?
Yes, sorry Chairman, I'm just referring back to the comments from the Conservation Officer, where it says the Avenue and Bunning Lane and Sywell Road also defines the formal parkland of Overston Hall Grade 2 listed. A large proportion of the estate was broken up before the hall was listed and the current curve street is relatively small. However, the former parkland is still legible, with a stone boundary wall maintaining a very strong visual and physical presence, and makes a positive contribution to the local character and distinctiveness. These non-designated heritage assets, so they're not listed, which form the setting of Oversted Hall, deserve a level of consideration when making plan decisions. So basically that's the status of the wall.
Okay. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, first of all, may I congratulate Mrs Townsend on putting her case so eloquently and explaining to us that this is, I mean, essentially, this is a wall that's fronting an unclassified county road. But for the wall, she wouldn't need planning permission anyway to put an access through. Am I right? Yes. This wall, I've known it all of my lifetime, and it's got more holes than a blinking colander. And I think it benefits from having those holes, actually. It breaks the technique itself. But I'm aware, as many members of this committee, or certainly they were all here at the time of a previous planning application in respect of a neighbouring property, will be aware of the little domestic dispute between her and her neighbour. And I may say, from what we heard last time, Mrs Townsend and the family have suffered unbearably because of works at the neighbouring property. And I've no doubt that she wishes to have this access so that she doesn't have to have anything to do with a neighbour. And I quite understand that, and I would want to do the same if I were in her permission. So I think this is a case here where the committee really has to make a judgment about, does another hole in this wall really matter if it's going to be done properly in accordance with the County Council's requirements? And my answer to that is no, it doesn't matter. And secondly, I think it would be in the best interest of community cohesion and good neighbourliness if we allowed this person to have her own access onto a road so that she doesn't have to be involved with disputes with a neighbour. I think there's a very strong case for us doing that.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you. Just really to follow up these comments from Councillor James, can the officers confirm that there haven't been any recent changes in the situation? That if the applicant has been in their home for some time, when they bought that home, they would have been aware that they had a right of access, but over a neighbour's land, but that they did not own the access or the entrance from the road. If that was the case, and presumably whoever the neighbour, is it in 69A, on buying the property, would have been aware that there was a right of crossover from from the neighbour. I just like to confirm that there was nothing that changed, that both parties would have been fully aware of what the situation was when they bought the properties.
Officers?
As far as I know, there was a change in terms of there's a new neighbour next door, or relatively new neighbour next door, and obviously this has led to this dispute that's been mentioned.
Yeah, but that's a question. It's nice if we can solve problems between neighbours, but that's not what we're here for. When the new neighbour arrived, did the legal situation change?
Well, I shouldn't have thought so. No, I don't know, is the honest answer. I shouldn't have thought so.
Okay. Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Chairman. As the District Council's heritage champion, I must say that I agree with the Conservation Officer's comments, although that this wall is not a listed asset, but it is an undesignated heritage asset, and I think that it's clear that there is no public benefit to offset the harm to the wall which would be caused by this opening. So I would support the officer's advice and propose in fact that we follow officer's advice and refuse the application.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
I doubt it.
Councillor Ring-Swift, would you wish to speak now or?
Yes, I would like, not that we didn't, I listened very attentively to what the owner of the applicant have asked. Now, if we have, because we have dispute with neighbour, that will be a reason to have something we want. We can all have very bad relationship with our neighbour. It's very difficult when your neighbour is so close and you don't have a good relationship. And I would suggest that counselling or have a sort of mitigation together, something. But I agree with Councillor Chandler. So the thing is a beautiful wall, and I think it's a sad situation, but it's a private matter between the two owners, and we could not do that. And I can understand how upset the applicant is.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Crone.
Thank you. I'd just like to say a few words as a local member. Obviously, I know this site very well. I mean, I know Edgerton pretty well. There are numerous holes in this wall. It's a difficult one to know where to go, which way to go down, really. But having the other debate tonight and heard what Councillor James has said, it's debatable whether or not an extra hole in that wall would make an awful lot of difference to the street scene in any way, really. I don't think. I mean, I think this is about the only property on that side of the road that doesn't have its own hole in the wall, as it were. So, like I say, we're not going to be opening up a massive floodgate for loads of other people to start putting holes in that wall. I wouldn't have thought by allowing this. And I don't know what Councillor James he hasn't put forward a proposition, but on balance, I think personally, I don't think that this probably the damage caused by putting this extra hole in the wall, it isn't sufficient to be against policy, I don't think. But I mean, obviously we've got a proposal by Councillor Chandler, haven't we, that needs to be reviewed, so I suppose we have to vote on that. We'll see, but I mean, it's a difficult one because there's so many holes in that wall, and personally I don't think probably another one would make an awful lot of difference, to be honest. And that's the way I'm looking at it from a purely heritage point of view. I don't think the damage here is sufficient to warrant refusal, bearing in mind everything else that's on that side of the wall, along the whole of Sidewell Road.
Thank you. Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. My words have probably already been said, so I won't add to the length of the debate.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Parker.
Yeah, I think purely from a planning aspect, which is what we're talking about, highways are no issues. It doesn't affect a designated asset. It's the only property without access directly to it, so I can't actually see any problems in allowing this application to go forward.
Okay, Councillor Frost.
Thank you. Just a clarification, if I may. I'm just puzzled because we're understanding that this has been prompted, albeit unofficially, by deterioration in the relationship between the neighbours, and we're also told that the motivation for the work is to make the road safer. And the bit that I don't understand is, however bad your relations are with your neighbours, I don't see how that makes a road more dangerous. In other words, if it was okay when the previous neighbours were there, but it's not now, that's what I'm puzzled about.
Any more comments?
What is it?
Sorry, that was a statement.
No, it was a question. What's the statement?
Well, it's not something that we're suggesting as officers. Having seen that, obviously the Highway Authority have no objection to it. But equally, there's an existing access there that they can't do anything about. But we didn't ask them to comment on whether it's more or less dangerous than the existing access.
Okay. Councillor Harris.
I would echo Councillor Parker's view. Knowing the road very well, it doesn't seem to me that an extra hole is going to make a huge amount of difference to the aesthetic of the area at all.
Okay. Well, everybody that wanted to speak has indicated. We have a proposal the application be refused as per officer's advice, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. Those against? 6. The application is not refused. That proposal is lost. So I need another proposal. Councillor James?
I'd like to propose that we go against officer's advice here and approve the application.
And the planning reason?
The planning reason is that the wall has no historical significance. Well, they don't need planning permission anyway, but for the wall, so it can only relate to the wall and its status as an asset which is within preservation or non-interference. If the wall wasn't there, then let's say it was a fence or something, an ordinary fence, they'd be entitled to do it and come out onto the road.
Do you accept that as a planning reason?
I think basically what members of both sides is they don't see one more hole makes any difference. I prefer to go with that basically. We don't agree that the level of harm that is caused by this is significant.
That's the better wording of what you're trying to say.
We'll go with that reason.
Right, do you have a second? Yeah, Councillor Cribbin, I think, was first, just before you, Councillor Harris.
That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say to what Councillor David said, I mean, I say what the officer has said is that, yeah, I suppose it's not what we're saying, what you were saying for refusal was that ENV 7 damage, significant damage to the street scene. I suppose we're saying that we don't think it does have a significant, therefore it doesn't breach ENV 7. So, okay, that's what we're saying. What I would say, though, I mean, obviously, because we potentially want to put some conditions on this going forward if we are going to accept it. I'm concerned about the trees. Wanted to make sure those trees aren't damaged in any way.
If it helps, I've got a prepared list.
Because those trees, I mean, I think those 2 sycamore trees, if we look at the pictures, I'm trying to think, the 2 sycamore trees that we're talking about that are right close to the...
They were probably distance, I think, or probably...
They're real... Obviously, they don't need to be removed. They don't need to be removed for the putting in the access, but obviously we have to be very careful about making sure that they're not harmed in any way. There is a possibility that the applicant might want to put an application in to do something with those trees later on, perhaps. I don't know. They've said tonight that they're worried that they may be held responsible for any damage and also I'm just wondering, it won't be long before those things probably demolish the wall in any event if they're not looked after.
What I've prepared is a note that goes on the end, and it says this approval does not include the removal of any protected trees. A separate street layout application will be required for any proposals to carry out works to protected trees on the site. So that's going on the note. I might as well just tell you what the conditions are going to be as well. I'm suggesting that it makes it easier for members to vote on the proposition. We're going to say full details of any proposed boundary treatment to the site with the next neighbour, effectively 69A, to be submitted to us and approved in writing. Works to be carried out in accordance with what we approve. The means of access to be laid out pretty well as it's shown on the highway drawing there. 3.3 metre width, half-bound surface for the first 5 metres from the highway, which is fairly typical to prevent material being scattered on the highway. Maximum gradients, which you can see anyway, not to exceed 115. I doubt that will be a problem. No gates, barrier or means of enclosure should be erected across the access within 5.5 metres of the highway boundary. Any such feature erected beyond that distance should be done to open inwards away from the highway. And the other one, which was shown on the drawing again, pedestrian visibility displays of at least 2 metres by 2 metres shall be provided on each side of the access. And it just sets out how they should be taken and to be kept free of obstructions. I must say, it struck me actually that putting window bins in your visibility displays is a pretty silly thing to do, really, but I'm not sure whether there are any alternatives from what's been said, but it just makes it more difficult for yourself to put it out, doesn't it? So those are the suggested conditions from the officers on that note on the TPA trees.
Can I just come back, Chairman, about
Well, I'm just going to ask I'll let you come back in a second. Proposer, you're happy with those conditions? Right, seconder, back to you. You're happy
it
with
was just
the
a
conditions?
clarification from what Keith has just said about the conditions. Does that mean that we are? I may have missed it when you were reading through them, but does that mean that we're not allowing a fence to go with that sweet chestnut tree on the?
I think all we're basically
You don't want to damage that tree.
we're going to negotiate on the details of what's there.
Yeah.
I think the neighbours said actually they wanted
something like bollards or something to.
Yeah, I
to
think the neighbours
fence
said something about they did.
Shore up that.
They did want something, didn't they? I think the neighbours said.
Yeah, I noticed in the report the neighbours said that if it was something like bollards and things, then make sure that this was.
Yeah.
Sort of like,
I think we're not seeing negotiate on that.
Yeah.
In the interest of the trees, really.
Yeah. Okay. I wouldn't want anything attached to the trees to hurt the
No,
tree.
no, I'm sure we wouldn't allow that anyway.
Councillor Evans first.
Yes, can we be, because you say those three are TPO, can we have maybe ask our expert on tree to have a view of the site and make sure that all the trees before any work, that those tree and other TPO planning, because there is maybe more tree on the site that we don't want to be damaged during that.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you look at the landscape officer comments in the report, he is aware.
He is aware.
He is aware of the situation. Yeah, he talks about impact on the various trees.
Okay. We have proposed the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. Those against? The application is approved. The next application is in Abbey South and it's 0824.
Thank you, Chairman. If we go to the photos, I think most members are quite familiar with this property. It's the news agency is actually in High Street in Daventry. The news agency itself has been closed for some time now, and the application for members tonight seeks consent to change the use of the building, which is the ground floor, to become a hot food takeaway. And you'll see from the comments from the town council and from neighbours that their concerns raised regards to owners of the business from the proposed activities and the extraction units. And there's also concerns regarding the disposal of commercial waste itself. Equally, you'll see comments from the DVC Conservation Officer, which has raised no objections to the proposal and actually considers that the proposal will lead to a visual improvement to the street scene. Also, environmental health officers have stated that objections such as the conditions and informatives being applied to the consent. The building itself has been empty for some time. The proposal would bring an empty building back into reuse with the main town centre itself, and as such, officers are supporting the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. We have one speaker, Mrs. Barnigo, who's representing the Town Council.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Town Council has considered it and submits an objection to it. On the south side of the High Street, there are no hot food outlets at all. All of the hot food outlets are on the north side, and the majority of those actually back onto parking, empty space, so there isn't any residential. And because of the lie of the land, any odours tend to sort of go over the top, and any residential properties are lower. Where this is situated, there are flats above to each side. There is also a children's nursery directly outside, and the children do play out there. So not only are we concerned about the odours, but they're very much the facilities for waste. You've seen on the photographs there the narrow access to the rear of the property, which is just over a metre wide, but there are various obstructions of metre boxes and things like that. And I fail to see how you would get an industrial-sized waste bin in and out there successfully. There is also, if you can go back to the photographs, it's a very narrow space at the back. It's probably no more than 4 foot wide where those bins could be stored. And beyond that is the garden for the actual nursery. So that's why we feel, as a town council, that it should be refused for those reasons, odour and environmental reasons.
Thank you. Local member, Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. Always a difficult one. Planning, isn't it? Because you're going to upset somebody. This is the high street, and I think you do expect to have things like takeaway food outlets in a high street. It is an unused unit at the moment, and I welcome anything that's actually going in and make the high street more usable, more right, with more things in it. I do take on board though what the town council is saying about the waste disposal, and the odours for that matter. But I do notice that in the conditions, this is actually conditioned on there being a suitable means of waste disposal and having an extraction unit that actually works in accordance with what will be expected in that environment. So on the basis that those conditions are in there, and on the basis that this council will enforce them, I don't see how we can actually deny the permission for this application.
Thank you. Any more comments? Councillor Croonin first, then Councillor Dowse.
Thank you. No, I reiterate what Councillor Wesley said. I mean, my hat on us was the portfolio holder for environmental health. I mean, we've got conditions in here to adequately address those situations should they arise. And so it's not a planning issue that we can turn it down on. So I would say that we go with officer's advice on this one.
Is that a proposal or?
Have you proposed that?
No, I haven't.
I proposed that, and
So you propose approval, right? Okay. Councillor Dowse. First of all, do you have a seconder?
Yes.
Councillor Chandler, were you wishing to say anything at this moment? Okay. Councillor Dowse.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, having read all this, and I made a number of notes on it, and actually what Councillor Brannigan from the Town Council, actually, yes, it's, I was a bit surprised at it, but it is absolutely true, because what I was looking at, I read the design and access statement, and I think, unfortunately, it's actually quite misleading. I thought anybody who doesn't know Daventry well might think that it's true. It states no hot food takeaway near the site. Now, obviously, there is no hot food on that side of the high street, absolutely. But there's the Mosaic opposite, there's Abdul's Canton House, round the corner the kebab takeaway, down the high street we've got the Bowen takeaway, Water Margin and Curry House at the other end. So it's absolute rubbish to say that there is no takeaway or restaurants or anything like that nearby. Having said that, yes, I'm sure it's not ideal to have a takeaway in that property, but I think as long as the conditions are imposed and they are adhered to, I feel it's one of those areas that we can't actually oppose it even if we don't really like it. So I think I will probably vote for it, and if you need a seconder, I'll second that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Dowse. Any more comments? Yes, Councillor Ritchie.
Yes, I broadly go along with much of what has been said. I am, however, sort of slightly concerned. We say that there is a condition that is there about the need for there being a satisfactory place for storing and removing waste. We say that, provided that condition is there, everything, we should be able to approve this. I feel slightly uncomfortable when we look at the sort of geography. I think, well, where is it going to go? I would have been much happier if this application had included an actual proposal as to how they were going to store waste, how, where the waste was going to be taken, how often, and so on. In the absence of that detail, it's a very big factor. And I feel slightly uncomfortable when somebody's saying, well, we'll leave that for the officers to negotiate. I get every confidence in our ability to negotiate, but I feel it's a thing that we ought to be taking responsibility for. I know that the proposal has been made. I would have been happier to have this decision deferred until there was more information about how some of these problems could be overcome. I mean, my other sort of slight concern is not so much the pollution through smell, but of noise. I see that the proposal is that this place can remain open until 11:30 at night. If that is the same as all other outlets on High Street, then that is perfectly sensible. But it just struck me that if there are flats above many of these houses in the High Street, 11:30 is quite late. And remember, the nature of a takeaway is different from a restaurant. There is a huge risk that what you will have cars revving up that will sort of sit there with their engine running while people go in to wait for their takeaway to be prepared and so on. I just wonder about the hours that are being allowed. But I'd be grateful if the officers could tell us if that is consistent with other things that are there. I don't know what we're going to say. I can't remember what we agreed for the cinema. But
I'll just come back and obviously, in terms of hours of opening, this is consistent with the nearby takeaways, which are within the vicinity. And also, obviously, if you refer to condition 3 does actually just refer to the odour control, it also refers to silence and noise control as well. So your concerns regarding noise control are being addressed within that condition.
Okay. As you are aware, I live 2 yards from one takeaway restaurant and 5 yards from a chip shop, which is sit down. I've lived there for 53 years. They both have odour controls. They are successful most of the time. When the wind blows the wrong way, sometimes you smell it, but you accept it. The one place has a commercial big bin collection service, and the other one has an alleyway narrower than this one. So it has smaller bins, similar to your dustbins, that it's collected in. So it does work. You can't get a big bin down this alleyway, and you can't get a big bin down one of these units in my village alleyway either, but it's done in small bins. I thought I'd mention that. Councillor Irving-Swift.
Yes, if I do enjoy Councillor Ritchie monologues, it makes our planning meeting very long. And I would like Councillor Ritchie, now we have been on the planning committee for some time, to go a bit quicker to the question, because I find our planning meeting tend to be a bit too long. So please, Councillor Ritchie, we are not experts, we can question our officers, but I think we should be a bit more concise, especially when you have that experience on the council, on the planning committee. Thank you so much.
Forget it, Councillor Ritchie. I hear what you're saying. I'm sure Councillor Ritchie heard what you're saying, but I think it's inappropriate to be saying this. I'm sorry.
I think we have been long enough, and we are very nice.
You've said it, you've got away with it, but I think it's not the thing.
I'm sorry, Chair. I would like to ask that the remarks be withdrawn
The marks will be
The marks
recorded.
will-
They won't be recorded.
Well, they have been recorded unless you're going to edit the tape.
Well, they won't be
I would
recorded.
ask that the remarks to
They'll be
withdraw.
struck out.
I fully-
They won't be listened to. I'm saying, don't listen to this. No, I'm sorry, but the comments were made, heard. It's not appropriate, maybe said. Let's leave it like that, Councillor Ritchie. Right. We've got a proposal that the application be approved, which is being seconded. All those in favour, please show. We got the number? Right, any against? Abstention? Thank you. The application is approved. The next application is a 0992 Ravensthorpe. Also it says Holwell, so it's probably on the borders of both of them. Few officers.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Ravensthorpe Reservoir. Basically, this proposal is for a new pumping station, etc., and various bits of equipment to go inside a new building that's going to be built to house all this equipment. And you'll see the site there has been chosen. It's in the dip in the landscape. If you know the site opposite the waterworks, it sits at the bottom of the dip, and there is a requirement on ambient water to provide this facility for emergency services. Obviously, if something goes wrong, people in the locality will still have water supply. Obviously, they know better than we do what the technical specifications are, and that's resulted in various bits of plant and equipment, including an overhead crane, which is to be housed inside the building, so that if something goes wrong, they can literally lift off the faulty valves or whatever it is with this crane and replace them with the new ones. So that has led to a slight increase, should we say, in the height of the building to accommodate the crane. Having said all that, the main concern seems to be that this doesn't really match the old waterworks buildings on the other side, which are obviously sort of Victorian Gothic type appearance, brick buildings, which probably are, the truth be known, pretending to be a manor house or something similar when they're not really. And I think our view is, well, yeah, that was the way they used to do that back in Victorian times, but this is now, you know, a modern piece of equipment, and the building that's housing it is not unlike an agricultural building in the open countryside. And we've got some distant views there. You're just looking at the view now, looking to the footpath back towards the blue porta cabins, and the main thing to point out is it's seen against rising ground because of the dip. And obviously the building itself will be green, not blue, and it will be to the side of that. And obviously that photo is taken in the winter. But for those of you that know the area, in the summer, the actual line is completely different in terms of the vegetation. Now, it obviously was necessary for them to remove some of the hedgework, as you saw in the photos. Sorry, the photos, but the idea is they're going to be replaced and there'll be more planting as well. So when it all goes back and it all starts to green up in the summer months, as I say, the actual road itself, as you'll see now, hopefully when this opens up, looks completely different, and it's very difficult to see anything. It's very, very green and very. Birches grow very high, etc. There's all the greenery there. So I think our view is that obviously we accept there is a need for this thing. We accept that Anglian Water have designed the thing to do what it needs to do, including the overhead crane, which they feel is essential. It has slightly increased the height of the building. But having said all that, we don't think that realistically we can go back, if that's what's been suggested, I don't know, but we can go back to the type of brick-built Gothic structures of the old days. It would be appropriate there anyway. We don't think it's going to have that harmful impact on the landscape, so we're happy with it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chief. Two speakers. First of all, Mr. Mark, Parish Council.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a necessary pumping station. Anglian Water is a multi-million pound business, and this is a £5 million project. This has to be completed by March the 30th. And here we are on March the 11th discussing it. The Parish Council first heard about it just before Christmas. We were told there's some preparatory work going on, which they got a planning application to do. Since then, Anglian Water have been brilliant. To be fair, they come and spoke to us at meetings. We've had 3 meetings of the Parish Council members who are interested down with them. We accept that it can't be inside the grounds of the old waterworks. We understand now why. When our first objection was put in, we had no idea why. And Anglian Water have tried hard to get rid of some other things. This building is 7 metres high. There is no engineering reasons why it needs to be as high as that. It could be half a metre down the ground and it would not affect the tolerance of the pumping station or the waterworks. They may say it will, but it won't. It's 0.05 of a bar and a 20 bar gauge well within the tolerance of the pipes. This is an excessively large building. There is no need for an overhead crane. If you see these buildings in the Fens, where they do far more water pumping than they do anywhere else, they're not as high as this. And whether it's made of brick or tin, it could still be perfectly adequate. Because if a roller shutter door is all they need to get in to get the pumps. These big water pumps aren't as big as a 7 metre gable, 7 metres to each clearance, which is what the system proposed. This building could be, and we understand the need for it, and we support the need for it. This building should be further away from the road, so the sight lines are left, because it's going to sit out like a sore thumb. And if you were a farmer building this building, we would be asked to put it further away from the road and more trees planted around it. And those are our main objections. It could be lower in the ground, it could be lower to eaves, and all the problems of removing damaged pumps and electric motors, and I have some experience of doing this, can be solved by engineering solutions. Anglian Water are going to have to do temporary measures to get this going by the 30th of March, whatever. We ask you to refuse this application, and we will certainly not object if we can go some way to avoiding the spoiling of the sight lines from that road. And as regards what Mr. Thursfield said about the Victorian buildings, you will remember when the last lot of buildings were built at the waterworks, when I was on the Parish Council, A, we were well consulted, and B, they're completely in keeping with the original buildings, which are over 120 years old. That's what I want to say, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Ms. Lapton, who's the applicant. Representing the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Councillors. My name is Catherine Laxton. I'm the Project Delivery Manager for the Ravensthorpe Resilience Scheme. Anglian Water wish to build a new resilience pumping station on the Teton Road opposite the current Ravensthorpe water treatment works. This scheme will provide resilience supply to circa 12,800 customers in the Long Buckby, West Haddon and Hillsborough supply zones, should there be a catastrophic failure of the Ravensthorpe water treatment works. Anglian Water are required by Ofwat to reduce the percentage of customers that are served by a single source. This new pumping station will deliver an independent, resilient supply of potable water into the local network. We believe we have taken a balanced approach in identifying our preferred site. Following Anglian Water guidelines, we are also mindful that the pumping station could not be constructed within the confines of Ravensthorpe water treatment works, and it had to provide an alternative, robust water supply that is fully independent in location and also operation. We considered several locations that on investigation were more visually intrusive or impractical on an engineering and business perspective, i.e. no local network connections, the suction of the delivery head pressures, the cost, carbon and the power. The proposed site is a junction of existing key essential infrastructure, and there is sufficient power also available. Other locations did not have these advantages. If you want to click to the next, thank you. Given the location, the structure has been designed to resemble an agricultural building. The height of the building is governed by the safe lifting, service, maintenance and control arrangements for the resilience pumps, and the need to be built above the EA stipulated 1 in 200 multi-year flood event. Next slide. We commissioned a landscape visual impact assessment which concluded the development will give rise to a limited and localised change to the landscape character. To mitigate against this impact, significant landscaping will be put in place, including hedgerows and mature trees, to provide a suitable visual environmental screening. Overall, our proposal is to build a remotely operated, fully automatic pumping station that satisfies Ofwat's requirements and the resilience needs for the Long Butley, West Haddon and Hillsborough supply zones. Thank you.
Thank you. Means I get my water from there. Right, local member, Councillor Minglewild, you wish to speak.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder, before I make any comments on the substantive application, whether I could ask a few questions of the officers based on the report or raise a few queries. The report refers in the section entitled flooding to the development being 96 metres above OAD. It doesn't explain what that is. And although it apparently equates to half a metre above the ground level, later on in condition 4 to be attached to it, there's a reference to 96 metres above ordnance datum brackets AOD. I assume OAD and AOD are the same thing, so is there a typographical error there or not? Secondly, in condition number 3, there's a reference to samples of materials to be used in the external services of the string of asterisks, which I assume in this context doesn't mean it's deleted. I assume that means building, but if we could clarify that. It's also in the report that somebody, I assume it's the applicant, and my apologies to them if it's not, has seen fit to uproot an ancient hedgerow in preparation for doing this, which is unfortunate. And the District Council's Conservation Officer has said that they would prefer to see the hedgerow reinstated along the original line, which the planning officers have not complied with in terms of constructing their recommendation to this committee. I just wondered why it was that the Conservation Officer's recommendations have not been taken account of in that respect. And fourthly, as a query, the Environment Agency section, which is on the second page of this report, says they have no objection to the proposal provided a condition is included on any approval. Maybe I'm being a bit dense, but I have absolutely no idea what that means and what condition it refers to. At which point, with your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pause just to get some clarification on this.
Chairman, the answer is yes, it's a typo. Yes, it went building. The reason the hedge is set back is for highway visibility. And number 4 is presumably a condition about the flood risk, submitted flood risk assessment. So hopefully that answers those 4 questions.
Very succinctly and concisely done. Thank you very much. Rather more succinct than the question. Anyway, on the substance of the application, one of the statements that's made to support it is under the heading financial considerations. This proposal will create additional jobs. Now, I accept that subsequently not a lot of weight has been given to that assertion. However, given that this pumping station is presumably automated, I'm at a loss to see how it's going to have any impact on the employment situation of Ravensthorpe or Hollowell or any other surrounding parish, perhaps. Well, the applicant can't now comment, but I don't understand that. I think in general, we ought to be all concerned about proposals to build in open countryside, which is what this is. Clearly, in some cases, the public good necessitates that it should happen. And I think Ravensthorpe Parish Council have been realistic in accepting that this is probably one of those instances. However, the issue, don't think here is the principle of what is built, it's what it looks like is the issue. And we hear talk about it being dressed up something like an agricultural building, which in my head I half thought of Tudor barns and things. In practice, a corrugated metal rectangle could be an agricultural shed, so that in itself actually doesn't say anything at all. My concern is that this is a very, very attractive area of countryside. It is recognised in the report as such as a special landscape area. This particular application would result in something being built that is quite clearly going to be a blot on the landscape, no matter what words you try to put to address that. And I think it would be, I think I'd probably have to suggest to the committee that they pay heed to the words of Ravensthorpe Parish Council, who've clearly gone into this in a great deal of detail. It would be a blot on the landscape. It would be a shame to spoil a very important landscape area when other options could be devised. And I would, for those reasons, ask the committee to accede to the Parish Council's views and to suggest that this goes back to the applicant to be re-thought.
Thank you, sir. Councillor, well, first.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm reminded to think this it's not a particularly big building anyway. The pumping station at the end of the sea building measures 11 metres by 18.5 metres with a height of only 7.5 metres, which is quite small if we're comparing it with some of the agricultural sheds that there are in the district. So I don't regard it as a blot on the landscape by any means. And I might say that if it had been proposed that this building be built in what is commonly known in Northamptonshire shoemaker's Gothic, then it would have been a blot on the landscape. But it will look like some variation of an agricultural building, and not particularly big either, especially in the context of the general landscape. So, as it's a necessary thing to happen on a needs-must basis, and there's a public good in doing it, I would have to say that I would go with officers' advice to approve, and I'd be quite happy to propose its approval too.
Thank you. Do you have a second? Thank you. Councillor Chandler, speak.
Nothing to add, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. Next speaker is Councillor Irving Square.
Yes, we heard the two speakers and they spoke eloquently. The chairman of the parish also say that they don't have a lot of objection except that they think it's a bit too high and it's not very pretty. Is that truly the best building they could build, or do you think as officers, do you think they could at least lower it a bit or do something just a tiny bit better? Because I think that is the crux of the matter. Everybody recognizes it's necessary to do it. And it's just a question of aesthetic. So is that the best that can be done with the constraints that we have? Or could we, because for example at County Council, we sometimes sank some ugly building so that they can blend into the landscape. So is that a possibility that that building could be sunk by 1 meter and that at that point we are 6 meters instead of 7, and somehow it's look less like a blot, but I don't know if that is possible in the emplacement or if Andy and Walter thinks that is the best building they can do for that reason.
The answer is, I don't know. I'm sure Andy and Walter thought about all this when they designed the building. As you've seen the cross-section, etc. They've set that out and they've explained that's why they want it that high. But I also have to say, yeah, I kind of agree with Councillor James really, that in the overall scheme of things, it isn't that big a building. So, and we've seen that long distance photograph from the footpath, where you're looking at those two stacked up blue porticos. That distance, and there's obviously going to be planting and it's going to be green, not blue. And it's obviously going to be the summer where all that's going to be green rather than no leaves on the trees. So I have to say, when we made the recommendation, we're kind of struggling to see what the visual harm is really, to be quite honest.
Okay.
So, sorry, can I come back? I just think that the height, it's not the length of the building, nor I think it's just the height. So if we could do something in the height, I think everybody might be happier. That's all what I want to say, but I don't have
To be fair, Councillor Irving-Smith, we're dealing with an application that is that height, that is that colour, that is in that position, and that's what we've got to deal with, I'm afraid. Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is an essential building, isn't it? People have got to have water, parish council understand that. They've listened, they understand why it can't be the other side of the road. My immediate reaction was, it's a pity it can't, really. But this is a really, really nice place, isn't it? And I don't know if everyone else knows it, but it's a really, really attractive piece of countryside that we've got within our locality. I go along it fairly regularly myself, and it is very, very nice. And yes, it may be designed to look like an agricultural shed. That's not a great thing, is it? That's not a massive advert for this place, is it? I mean, we don't necessarily like the agricultural sheds that we see around the countryside with tin or asbestos roofs. You know, they're not pretty. They are, most of them are pretty ugly. As I said, this is a really, really nice place. And Councillor James is right. It's not the biggest building in the world, but this building is going to be there for pretty much ever, really, isn't it? Or until we need water, until it's revamped. And it is there. And yes, in the summer there are trees and there is a lot more greenery. But we do have 6 or 7 months when there isn't, don't we? I mean, like now, when we can see it. I mean, the argument that part of the year it's all right is almost ridiculous. You know, we do have a winter scene in this country, don't we? It's part of November. Can you imagine that all covered in snow and white with a great big greenish building sticking out of the ground? You know, Anglian Water, they're not a destitute organisation, are they? They are guardians of much of our countryside and of the environment in general. And it's like they could do a bit better on this, couldn't they? They really, really could. And just to try and put it up as cheaply as possible, to make it look like an agricultural building, I think it's a little bit disgraceful, really, in the context of where it is. I don't think I can support it.
Thank you, Councillor Wesley. Councillor Ritchie.
Councillor Wesley has said much of what I was going to say. I accept the arguments for why the building needs to be site. It's actually not all that big. I accept that the officer's arguments that these days we are not in a position to build the Victorian water palaces that might have been built as part of a century ago. We can't go down that. But I can think around the country. I mean, particularly if you look at Scottish Hydro, that has needed to put up buildings to contain plant in beauty spots all over the country. All over the country of Scotland. If you go to these places, they have managed to put up structures that, yes, they're essentially no doubt inside, much the same as this. But from the outside, there is something that softens their impact, that makes them look as if they're broadly, attractive buildings. I think there's something disingenuous about saying that this has been designed to look like, an agricultural barn. It strikes me as the thing that you don't design. It's a box that's been put across the top of the equipment. And I really feel that, on something like this, we should be taking a stand and passing this back to the applicant and saying, look, we accept that this has got to be there. We accept the broad dimensions of it. But we do not accept that we can we will just therefore accept anything as utilitarian as a metal box that is going to be stuck in the countryside. Painting it green doesn't make a great deal of difference.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just thought I'd better come back and just put this in sort of context for you. The permitted development rights for agricultural buildings allow 1,000 square metres in floor area and up to 12 metres high as permitted development. And there are loads of buildings like that, obviously all over our district, that comply with that. So I just wanted to put that out there, because obviously that is much smaller, as has already been stated. And yet the government are saying you can have 1,000 square metres up to 12 metres high as permitted development, and that doesn't have any regard to special landscape area or anything else. But that is clearly consideration should be decided. The officers have taken into account in making their decision that this is okay in that landscape.
Can I just ask for clarification, Chair? I mean that would be permitted development for an agricultural building. It may be unfortunate that we have no control over the design and appearance of agricultural buildings that are built within that permission. But here, it's not an agricultural building. We do have a right to say no, or we want something different. And I would simply argue that we exercise that. The fact that farmers can do something even worse doesn't, it's not an excuse for this.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I ask us to go back to the photograph with the tractor tyres in the land? So thank you, that one. Because through you, Chairman, can I ask if that, well, first of all, confirmation that photograph was taken in the middle of a field. It's not from a road, is it?
No. It's taken from a footpath. The actual road is that hedge line that you can see there.
Yeah.
So they've walked from the road onto the public footpath. I don't know how many metres into the field, and then taking the view running parallel to the hedge, looking down the hill. Where you
Thank you. So I can see how the purpose of that photograph is designed to illustrate that if you happen to be walking your dog or whatever on that footpath, the argument is that the waterworks won't be offensive. But it's the case, isn't it, that most people won't be seeing it from that perspective. Most people will be seeing it from the road. And I wonder why we've chosen a photograph which will be seen by a small minority of the people who are actually going to see it for real. Just the choice of location seems. Can I ask about why we chose that location? It seems quite obscure.
I don't think it is obscure. It's a public viewpoint from the public footpath. We've got photographs on the road as well. There's a photograph from the road. You can just about see the blue portcullis there.
Okay, anybody else?
Just got something else to add, Chairman. There are permitted development rights for water and sewage and it says things about plant or machinery, and they're also allowed to have up to 15 metres high. So, is it plant or machinery? Is it a building? I don't know. But that's what water and hydraulic power undertakings are allowed. Plant or machinery is permitted development. So, again, that's something else you have to factor in, really. Again, the government is saying, well, you're allowed up to 15 metres high. Again, that's twice the height of that building.
Right, just a quick one, Councillor McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to echo very much the comments of Councillors Wesley and Ritchie. It is an utterly horrendous rectangular metal box plonked in the middle of a special landscape area. The photograph that we've just seen taken from the road is somewhat misleading because it's taken from halfway up the hill near the entrance to the Victorian pumping station. If you were a bit further down the road, you'd have a completely different view of it. As I think it was Councillor Wesley said, Anglian Water are an incredibly wealthy organisation. Some sort of landscaping to mitigate this, a more sympathetically designed shape of building to fit with the landscape is also a possibility. And as has been said, this building will be forever, or something else will replace it, which will be much the same size. I really do suggest to the committee that this needs to be put back for further thought.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I actually support the application. What I do find, what's the word, a struggle with Anglian Water, having only started to speak to the parish council recently. They should have spoken to the parish councils months before this started. They would then, the parish council would then understand perhaps what Anglian Water have got to do, what the size of the building, and that could have been resolved at that level, not suddenly just to decide to start talking to them in the last 3 months. Because I go down there every week, and that plant started 3 months ago. So I wish Anglian Water would actually learn to speak to the parishes and the people ahead of the game, rather than coming with 20 days to go saying that's got to be enforced. Just saying that, I do support what Anglian Water want to do.
Thank you. Well, I think we've had a speech from everybody that's indicated. We have a proposal that the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. 8. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 11. The application is approved. This application is in Brixworth and it's number 1100.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application that is for a single-storey rear and side extension. The proposal was previously submitted under the law because we wanted to get regularised the fact that they acquired some additional land at the side of the property, which has considerably increased the size of the garden. So now when you see the extension, the proposed extension in this context, it doesn't look quite as large in the much larger garden. So on that basis, we're happy with it. We also point out a high hedge between this property and the neighbouring property, who haven't objected in any event. But the height of the extension will be about the same height as the top of that hedge. So it runs down that boundary with kind of already agreed wall there. And that's the larger garden extension that's been added onto the side of the property. So when you see it on the planning, we think it's okay where it's not overdeveloped at the site, which is I think what the concern of the parish council was. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chief. Local member must be you, Councillor Barker.
Well,
no, there's two of you.
There's two.
Your part. Well, which one? Councillor Harris, you can go first. Blow him.
Okay. Blow in. Fair enough. Okay. My general sense is that I wouldn't have any huge objection to an extension. I know the parish have some issues, but my view is that it's not really anything that's going to be interfering too much with anyone around it. It's a fairly discrete area, so my general view is I wouldn't object at this stage.
Okay. Councillor Barker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Sorry,
that's all right. Members will recall that this location, it was subject to a change of use from a buffer strip to a garden area, which we passed in December, in actual fact. So you can see there the extra land now. So I agree with the officer that the increased garden will accommodate the extension and therefore is not overmassing and sits well within the enlarged garden. There is no overlooking of the neighbouring properties, as there is no windows facing the adjoining property, and it's a single-storey extension, and therefore I propose we accept officer's advice and approve the application.
You all second that? I'll take the other member. A lot of hands went up that time. Do you wish to say anything else?
No.
Okay. Anybody else wish to speak? No. If not, we have a proposal to be approved, which has been seconded. All in favour? Unanimous. 11 votes. Thank you very much. The application is approved. The next one's in Woodford Halls, and the number is 000 number 3.
Thank you, Chairman. The application site actually lies the eastern side of South Street. If we could just go to the site plan, the block plan, you'll both see that from the history as well, that planning permission was granted in 2017 for a new house within the rear of 23 South Street, together with a detached garage. Now, since that approval, the consent has been implemented and the drive to provide access to that particular road has been constructed. Equally, since that approval, the Woodford Neighbourhood Plan has sought to provide a confines line which is drawn through the garden of this particular property. And the proposal tonight actually seeks to move property 2 metres further north into the improved garden area. and also to move the garage 1 metre further into that area as well. So the reason why the application is before members tonight is that we do have a new policy circumstances in that we have a new neighbourhood plan, but at the same time it is a material consideration that we also have, this particular plot also has the benefit of the consent of a property on that particular site already. Anything this application is doing tonight is moving that property 2 metres further into the garden. And as a consequence, we don't feel that there's any significant harm to the character of the area. That piece of garden will remain to be garden to the proposed property. We won't receive from the report that the neighbours haven't objected to the basis that it will affect their properties in any way, but just on the basis that it will be beyond the confines of the village because the confines line is drawn through that garden. And as a consequence, we're recommending this be approved, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. We have one speaker, Mr. Rowley from the Parish Council.
Thank you, Chair and ladies and gentlemen. I've been tasked by the Parish Council and our fellow councillors to come and speak to you tonight in support of our village plan, which the councillors spent, I'm told, I'm quite new to the council, so I'm told that they spent 3 years creating the village plan and had many consultations about the boundary and so on, and they're very, very, very concerned that this is the first application judged against that village plan, and that it shouldn't be set aside and the planning allowed to go outside it. This site was in fact subject to 3 planning applications previously in 1989 and 1991, plan numbers 0050, 0168 and 1045. All of which were rejected on the basis that those applications put buildings outside of the village boundary, which was in a similar position to where it is on our village plan, and that the subsequent application, which was approved in 2017, sat within it, apart from the single garage. This application seeks to move the house outside of our village boundary, which we're very concerned sets a precedent, and it also seeks to change the single garage to a double garage. There was great concern, I understand, that the garage was approved outside of the village boundary, and to make it now a double garage, it seems to be entirely unnecessary. And we would appeal to you all that you should be consistent with your previous decisions in upholding the village boundary. Thank you.
Thank you. Local member, Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with the Parish Council. There's no point having village confines if you don't go along with them, even if it was a couple of centimetres outside it. I'd agree with what's just been said. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Other members. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's obvious to me that the bulk of that house is actually within the village confines. Now, I'm not saying this is the case in this but as often as may be, the villages and village confines are very arbitrarily drawn, usually with the object of preventing development, but sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to the line of a village confines. It may be because you can't take into account outlying outbuildings or outlying houses or something like that. It's very arbitrary and it's always debatable. Now, if this were a dispute over £2 the garden, then of course a lot of courts might say that what you're arguing about this is that a de minimis rule must apply here, because substantially nearly all of that house is within the village confines. By just extending that line out, it's a couple of metres or so, reline that garage, it's not harming anybody, it's not damaging any neighbour, it's not harming anyone's views. There's little point in being so dogmatic about it. I think this is a case where we should go with the officer's advice and take a practical view of the situation and approve this application.
Thank you. Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, pretty much agree with Councillor James there. I do respect the village and their plans, and I'm sure the inordinate amount of work that they put into it to come up with a solution for Rutland. But just looking at this, it's a difficult situation, isn't it? Most of the house is within the village. The garage, I am right in saying it's not over. The garage has already got planning permission and is outside the village confines. So if it's a precedent thing, that's actually already been done, and there's nothing we can do about it, is there? That's actually already happened. And the proposal is that the house is actually sort of well within that as well. I mean, obviously the concern is that you carry on and extend along that line somehow or other behind it. But I think on the basis that garage is already there, most of the houses within the village, I think it is a little bit pedantry to say that all the work is for naught. And as far as precedent goes, can we say something? This is actually approved on the basis that there was already extenuating circumstances. But I don't think that we should really deny this.
Thank you. Councillor Wesley.
Yes, listening to what the parish said, I think the house is one thing and it's extended a bit, but in the plenty. But it's a garage won't bother me, because from a single it becomes a double, and even if you put a condition on 6, we know that garage with a planning application could be extended on two car garages can be extended quite nicely into a little house. So for me, if it would be just a house and the garage would have stayed as it was, I do not see the problem. But I would like the opinion of the officer. I know we have to judge every application on its own merit, but do the fact that it's a double garage, do it really weaken the position of the neighbourhood plan, and for every neighbourhood plan as we have them now?
Is that a question?
Yeah. Sorry, Sean.
I think the short answer is, basically, this permission for the original house was clearly given before the neighbourhood. That is a unique circumstance, if you like, now, which is why it doesn't set precedent, because you've got that permission extant, which you won't have for the next person who comes along and says, well, I want to build outside the village confines. So you have to have regard to that, really, and it's probably unique in this particular case. But I think what Councillor James said as well applies, that you have to not only say, yeah, it's contrary to policy because it's gone outside the line, but you then have to say, well, what harm is it causing? And that's, I think, where the officers are coming from when we're saying, given that that house has been allowed, the differences are significant in our opinion. But I don't think it sets a precedent, because obviously you have got an existing plan permission. We won't have that normally, where somebody says, I want to build outside the village confine.
Thank you, that reassured me.
Being chairman of a large parish council as well, I can imagine if the same thing happened to my parish council, they would go mad, even though that had existed, that you could build the garage outside the confines. They would say, well, we spent 3 years doing it, and the first time it comes to planning committee, it's considered okay. And I can understand why Woodford Holes are saying that, because my parish council would say exactly the same, which is a large one. So I can understand why they're saying it. But you've got to weigh up the arguments between the two.
Chairman, I think our officer answer, it's an exceptional circumstances. It was already agreed beforehand, so that reassures us that it should not, willy-nilly, that cannot happen.
Well, that's up to you to vote that way then. Right, we have a proposal. We don't have a proposal. Yes, Councillor James.
Yeah, I propose that we go with officers' advice and approve.
Okay, do you have a second then? Yeah. Councillor Wesley. Okay, does anybody else wish to add anything? Quick one, Councillor Holmes. Oh, you're voting now.
I was voting.
Councillor Ritchie.
I would be grateful, Chair, for just one final clarification from the officers about what the planning position was. That the original planning permission from the garage was before the plan set that boundary. Is that right? If we now had out of the blue an application to put a garage, even a single garage, outside the boundary, our answer would be no.
I think it would clearly be contrary to policy, which some of it is, but you obviously wouldn't be in that instance having regard to the fact that they've already got permission to build one there. That's the difference. That's what I'm trying to say. That's why this is a fairly unique situation that doesn't set precedent in that sense. Because the next one, presumably, that tries it won't already have planning permission, because that's virtually on half the footprint, isn't it, of the previous building. That's the difference.
And we would normally assume that if somebody was designing a building, the house I'm referring to here, of that shape, any architect given the job would start off with what were the boundaries of the village and the footprint within the boundaries.
It's normally, yeah.
Okay. There's no more voices we want to hear from. We'll have a vote. I've got to propose the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. Nine. Those against? The application is approved. The next one's Shabby South, and it's 0033.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will recall that permission was given recently for the cinema site in Daventry, and as part of that development, the Burbage Wall was to be rebuilt on the same alignment that it currently is. The proposal for members tonight is a reduction in the northernmost part of that wall, i.e. the 6 metres of the northernmost part, to be reduced from 3 metres to 2.4 metres. Those members who are familiar with that wall will understand that at the very top end it is 2.4 metres in any case, but as the land drops away, the height of that wall is retained and eventually becomes 3 metres. There is already a step in the wall, some 16 metres to the south, and this proposal will again obviously add another step to the wall. So the overall height of the wall consistently will be 2.4 rather than 2.4 then turning to 3. The reason for this, as mentioned before, is that the bricks to be used to rebuild that wall were supposed to be all the original bricks. And following the demolition of that wall, the removal of that wall, a lot of the bricks were found to be unusable. So this is a solution to ensure that all the original bricks continue to be used on that elevation, so retaining that character of the building whilst allowing the reduction. You'll see from the report that the conservation officers made no comments at all on the application. So therefore no objections were raised to the proposal from the conservation officer. However, you'll see from the report equally that the town council are not supportive of the full wall being reduced at that bottom half, although they acknowledge that the alignment of the wall is as per the historic alignment. And based on that, we don't think there's any significant harm to the conservation area or to the proposed wall. Officer recommend the application be approved, Chairman.
Thank you, John. Yeah. Only one person left anyway. Brannigan, to speak to the Town Council.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say that the document I have in front of me from the Major Project Officer of Development Control states that to lower the top of the wall by a metre, not 0.6 of a metre, to lower it by a metre, force a length of 6 metres. That's quite a substantial, that's 6 square metres, yes, 6 square metres of wall. The actual, the Town Council is obviously very relieved that it's following the original footprint of the wall, and so it should, as it is the last boundary on Forest Hill, following medieval Burbage plot boundary, and should therefore be reconstructed on that footprint to retain that historical link, because all the other boundaries have been lost to the car park, as have the southern owners of Fern Square. It's the last survivor of some 21st such boundaries that was still extant in 1570. It's also part of the complete boundary forming Orange Yard right up to the street. The plan of the boundary and hence the wall dates back to the pre-conquest field system, probably Saxon, on which the original plots were laid out, and this is our last link with that history. The wall construction itself is also historic, as it contained early handmade bricks, probably predating the 19th century, as well as later patches of machine-made bricks. When the wall was dismantled, these should have been recorded to be rebuilt in the same order to retain the historical significance. I appreciate that there has been loss of actual material, but the extent of the actual investment in this site, I'm sure, could include an additional 6 square metres of reclaimed bricks from a yard somewhere, probably not too far away from here, and that is the Town Council's take.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Well, happy sales, isn't it, again? Yeah. So, happy salesman.
It's me again.
Council Wesley, isn't it?
Yeah. I was really disappointed to see this supported this development all the way through. I'm really pleased that the cinema up there stood up against quite a lot of opposition to this. People considered the library to be historic. It's part of the town. There's a lot of things to do with it. There's a lot of discontent about the demolition of that. I said I believe it was the right thing to do. But if you listen to the consultations, one of the things that was all about it was to try and at least maintain the visual of what Daventry was, with this great big new building being stuck in the middle of it, because that's what we're actually doing. And this is an historic wall. It's the historic boundary. It's an historic wall. It's got some really old bricks in it, and it's at a height that actually makes it look significant. And I did go along to those consultations, and people were really quite indignant about maintaining this view. We had all the hassles about whether we should actually retain this wall and the money that it was going to cost in this chamber. This chamber, there was a lot of dissenting voices about how much it was going to cost. I spoke for it because it was actually maintaining something worthwhile with a certain amount of integrity. I've also had people complain to me about how this wall was demolished and how it was actually looked after in the first instance. And my understanding is it wasn't done particularly well. This council has invested a lot of money in this wall and maintaining it at its previously current level. And it seems to me we're just riding roughshod over a previous decision now, or trying to ride roughshod. And I find it amazing that earlier on, in this meeting, we had a discussion about a wall with making a driveway entrance into it. Well, there's already loads and loads of driveway entrances, with covered in ivy and miles long, with conservation officers being really upset about it. And then all of a sudden, this one has got absolutely, there's nothing to be said. I find it absolutely amazing. If you look on page 21 of the previous application in Abbey South, around policy BN5. It's actually, obviously the policy is quite eloquent, and it actually, I think BN5 says it all on page 21, where we're talking about changing the use of a building where that's invoked. And again, not really very much said about this wall. This wall is integral to our history. Yes, dropping it somewhat, you can still say, yes, it follows the boundary. Yeah, it does. But it's not as it was. And we should be looking after this and just maintaining that link with the past. I cannot support this. We should do what we said we were going to do. We said we were going to look after this wall, we said we were going to pay for it, and now we're pretty much reneging on what we told the people of Daventry. I just don't think it's satisfactory. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wesley. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, there's been a lot of debate about this school, both in planning committee and elsewhere. But it is a significant fact that the conservation officer has remained silent this time on this issue. Now, when we're discussing the historical background of this wall, it reminds me of that episode in Only Fools and Horses, where Trigger says, I've had that brush so many years, it's had 3 new handles and it's had 6 new heads on it. It's not the same brush anymore. That wall, very few of those bricks go back hundreds of years. It's a mixture of all sorts of different types of brick, including common flattened bricks as well. And not all of it is pointed in lime mortar. Some of it is cement, and not particularly well done either. And the problem with that site generally is it's a sloping site. Aesthetically, it would be better if it was stepped down. It would certainly be safer. And I use that word safety very deliberately because old Daventry people will remember that it's only been about 35 years since a young 10-year-old boy climbed the wall down in Abbey Street, the churchyard wall, and fell off and was killed. Young Tim Blackham, I think he was 10 years old. And that wall, the height it is now, once that's rebuilt, that's going to be very tempting for little boys to try and scale that wall. And dropping from a height like that onto concrete paving slab ain't going to do them any good at the So, a number of reasons. One, I think it's aesthetically better. It's the northern end of it is at a lower level, and particularly because it will need less of what bricks can be salvaged. Even those that have been salvaged are not particularly good by any means, and it won't require too expensive foundations. It will be safer because of prevailing winds and because of the temptation, the little boys in particular, probably girls these days, to try and climb it. And all in all, I think it would be in the best interest of everyone concerned if we approve this application as it is. And I repeat again, the silence of the Conservation Officer who first raised this wall in the original application, first raised the question of this wall, is significant on this occasion. The applicant, the council in this case, is doing the best they can to retain the best of what is salvageable. And look at that wall and I don't know.
Thank you. Councillor Wesley, you want to come back to it?
Yeah, just want to point out, the fact that it hasn't been well looked after isn't a reason not for looking after it anymore. I think that's a really, really poor reason to actually bring up. If it is the proverbial trigger's broom, then what is the problem in actually maintaining its current height? Because we could actually go and get some more other bricks, couldn't we, and hide them a little bit lower and keep it as it is in keeping. So that's not an argument either, is it? And that's for the height and people climbing on it and jumping off. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's just crazy. I mean, otherwise you'd be arguing that it should all be at the reduced height and actually not having the wall at all. So that's just not really a satisfactory answer, I'm afraid. And I will reiterate this, that I cannot believe With the things we've heard about the Conservation Officer's views tonight, that this hasn't been picked up by the Conservation Officer. I really am amazed.
Thank you. Joe, you want to come back on that?
I just want to draw members' attention back to the application we've got before us. What we have here is an application with a length of a 35 metre length of wall, and with the exception of the last northernmost 6 metres, it will be in accordance with what the previous approval was. You'll see from the photograph that actually, even on the original wall, it was stepped at one point. And this proposes to step just the last 6 metres of that 35 metres. So in consideration of the application, members have to have regard to what would be the harm that would result from that reduction of the 0.6 metres for the last 6 metres.
Thank you. Councillor Robin-Smith.
Yes, John has answered my question, but I feel for Councillor Wesley, because it was £120,000 that we had to spend on the wall, and people from outside the town could not understand why and so on. So we got all the flag from everybody, so we agreed that the wall had to be rebuilt as it is and so on, and now we have to change, and I find that rather sad that we didn't see it from the beginning. And that is what I said. Now we are where we are. But I do think that we could rebuild the wall as it is by putting maybe at the bottom new brick that or reclaimed brick and do it. So I understand what Sean said, but I am a bit concerned about the way we went about.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie.
Just to add to what Councillor Irving Swift has said, it's not just people outside Daventry that didn't understand why we were talking about spending 120,000. There are plenty of people in Daventry that couldn't understand why we wanted to spend such a huge amount of money on an old wall. Yeah, I mean, I hear Councillor Wesley's arguments for this one. I would like the wall to be there and to be as near as possible to what the wall was centuries ago, if that is at all possible. But I think that we've got to face it, that if I had never been involved in planning committee meetings and council meetings for this issue, it would never have occurred to me that that old wall was not just a leftover that was waiting to be bulldozed down and should be replaced by railings as soon as possible. I think that if we are going to have it, then it has got to be as authentic as it possibly can be. You know, okay, we need to put in new bricks. We accept that, you know, even old buildings have got to be, you know, have got to be worked on to keep them to keep them stable and presentable. But if we're going to do anything, I do feel that we need to have a condition here. It may be that there was a condition in the original application that says that there has got to be a permanent notice, an elaborate one, not one of these that disappears with the weather, that actually states what the wall is, why it has been retained, what is its significance in terms of the history of Daventry.
Thank you. I must admit, I too, when the first application came in, had exactly the same view as Councillor Wesley. In fact, I made the assembly that, I said if it was Joe Blogg's builder, we'd insist that Joe Bloggs would do it.
Yes.
And working on that theory, we ought to do it. It's difficult when you hear it's just 6 metres, and 6 metres is from here to not far off where the lady is speaking from the town council from where I am. That's about 6 metres. It's a difficult one, but we've got to justify it. But remember, we're the applicant. Now, would it be different if it was somebody else who was the applicant? That's what I ask. So With no proposals at all yet, so it's up to you.
Through the chairman, Councillor Ritchie mentioned about a plaque to commemorate the history and to give some explanation of the significance of its alignment. I think we can put a condition on that.
Yes.
Okay, good.
And also, yes, I think we should put a history, as Councillor Ritchie said, and also the cost.
We
Because
haven't
like
got a proposal to do it yet, so.
yeah, if we could, a little history of the award.
Chair, just one further comment to echo your thoughts, which is if it was another applicant of this type of wall, I suspect we would be really encouraging and enforcing that it should be put back exactly as it was.
Yeah, I think if somebody else had owned it, I don't know who originally owned it, was it Northampton County Council?
It would have been the school wall, wouldn't it?
I think basically somebody would have been forced to maintain it. I think I come back to Councillor James's comments, and I think the trigger analogy is absolutely spot on. This is not the wall that was. It's not the original wall. It's shall we say an up-to-date image of what the wall may have looked like from the past. It's somewhat of a waste of time and money since it's not the original. Having said that, I dare say we're going to approve this and we're going to do that, and I'm happy to approve it. If you want me to make a proposal, I propose that we...
Choice is yours.
Okay, I'll make the proposal that we go for approval on this. I think we should have a plaque on it, and what comes to mind is if those who've been to the Royal in Derngate, there is a wall there on the Royal Theatre, and they have made a feature of it. It's a pretty ugly wall, but it's quite interesting. So this could actually be the same, and if it is an important asset, we need to be educating the people as to what its importance actually is.
Do you have a second of that? Councillor James, do you wish to say anything else?
Well, I ought to mention this because if we were to rebuild it as it was, and the full height as it was, we would have to get these bricks to match up. I can tell you that it would be almost impossible to get bricks to match up, either reclaim bricks or if bricks were to be made up specially. The cost, a figure was mentioned to me, I couldn't believe it. The cost of a single brick, bearing in mind that you would only require a small load to be made up of something like £1,000 a brick. It just isn't possible to do it. And I don't think you would find reclaimed bricks of that particular motley collection of age group. I don't think you would find it. So it would be almost impossible to do anyway. So that's another reason for actually doing what we can do and doing it well, which is the steps wall, the last 6 metres being at a slightly reduced height, which would aesthetically be better. I can tell you that from a surveyor's point of view.
Okay, so we've got a proposal then that the application be approved subject to a plaque showing its history being attached to it, but a little more permanent than a temporary one, according to Councillor Ritchie. All those in favour, please show. Those against? I'm with you as well. The application is approved, 72, and there must be some abstentions then as well, 2 abstentions. Thank you.
For the plaque, we could ask...
I'm sorry, I can't hear you with the noise.
So with the plaque, maybe we should ask the Museum of Daventry and our officer to find the right wording.
I'm sure that's the way they'll go about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we come to the last but not least, the other application in Brixworth, which is 0037.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a site in Countryway, which is in the centre of the village. It's a little cul-de-sac. there was an original bungalow on the site, and they sold all the land lots surrounding it and gradually built houses on it. And this particular site for this application is a remaining part of the original front garden of the bungalow, which has been separated off as a separate plot. You'll see from the planning history there has been planning permission granted to allow a single dwelling on there, but equally there's been planning permission refused to have two dwellings on there, and that also went to appeal and the appeal was dismissed. The inspector said, well, I agree with the council, it's too much, it's increasing the density which is harming the character and it's contrary to local plan and contrary to neighbourhood plan policies. So this application's come in, and it's obviously been an attempt to try and overcome the reasons for refusal by redesigning the property, because that's what was originally approved as a single dwelling, and now redesigned it to the elevation hopefully that Tony's about to show. There you go. It's now been done to make it look much more attractive like a barn. I do find that quite attractive compared to what's been approved, but unfortunately it's still two dwellings. So I think that's our issue with it really, that whilst we do like that elevation, if that's a single dwelling, I don't think we'd have a problem with it, but as it remains two dwellings, it's still contrary to the reason that we're refused for two dwellings in the first place. So that's the gist of it. And given that that decision was backed up on appeal, maybe we've got to go to another one, I don't know. Anyway, that's what I've recommended refusing, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So, Brixworth, local members again. Who's going first this time? Councillor Parker, you're nominated.
Thank you, Chair. Right, the bit of history which Keith just mentioned. Two detached dwellings were refused by DDC 078 in 2017, and the appeal was dismissed in June 2019. Permission has been granted for a detached property in 2018-0293. This application seeks to build two semi-dwellings now, so it's back to the original. The application for two dwellings is cramped and a contrived development. I would draw your attention to the inspector's comments on page 61, referring to the impact of two dwellings on the character and appearance of the area. The officer's summary on page 65 highlights reasons for refusal, namely it is against the Brixworth Neighbourhood Plan and adopted Part 2 plan. I see no reason but to accept officer's advice, as it was refused previously and dismissed at appeal. I propose we accept officer's advice for refusal.
I will second.
Do you wish to second, sir?
I just wish to second.
So you second, yeah? You can speak if you want to.
Again, I, in principle, believe in the idea of infill, but the application is for two dwellings, not for one. So I would second.
Okay. So we've got both members, local members agreeing. Any other comments? If not, we have a proposal that the application be refused for the given reasons, which has been seconded. All in favour, please show. Unanimous 11. Thank you. That concludes the... And I think it should be recorded in the minutes. You'll notice that Maria Taylor looks a bit different tonight. You all know from the council that Tony is the new man on the left now, and Maria's moved to different things. So, although we probably won't see her again at this committee, and she's given a few years and quite good service to planning, and there ought to be a recording of thanks in the minutes. So, if you're happy with that, we'll end by saying that. Thank you, Maria, and welcome, Tony. Okay?